Talking to her is Meena Vaidyanathan, founder Niiti Consulting. Meena's had a long and accomplished career across business development, marketing, and public affairs. She's advisor to a number of globally recognized social enterprises and consults with both for-profit and not-for-profit organizations in various capacities. She regularly teaches management and social entrepreneurship at leading Indian and international universities, and her team's research on gender safety helped X Prize announce the Anu and Naveen Jain Women's Safety X Prize on UN Day in 2016, and Niiti Consulting, her company, was one of the early advisors to the Indian Institute for Human Settlements on several issues around urbanization research and outreach. So Meena and Vandana will be in conversation.
Well, I think firstly I'm in August company. One, because she works in an area that I'm deeply interested in. I guess most of us are living in cities, which is urbanization. But interestingly, she works also in the space of gender. So I think that makes her doubly interesting to me. So thank you, Vandana, for firstly joining us.
Thank you, Meena.
I've always believed that, when we talk about empowering women, there are two things that are mandatory for making women empowered. One is a no-brainer. We talk about financial independence and making sure that she has something in her name or something to fall back on. But the other really is mobility. Whether she is able to, basically, whether she can run away in time from whatever she wants to run away. Mobility is a very, very important part of how empowered a woman is. So, and since you've, written books about urban spaces, especially a book around, the urban villager on peri-urban spaces, and our urban cities in India are really not typical cities as they are defined around the world. So let's start with how women move in the city. As a researcher, do you have any views on that?
Yeah. A couple of years ago, there was this Bollywood song called Chittiyan Kalaiyan. You must have all heard of it. It's a staple in all the ladies' sangeet. And it's quite a catchy tune, and I like it. But it's the lyrics that strike me as bizarre every time it blares. So the girl is pleading with the guy and saying, shopping kara de, golden jhumke dila de, romantic picture leke jao, and colorful chudiyan dila de. And she's pleading with the guy, requestam paiyan ve, please, I'm requesting you. And it's not, the lyrics are not saying, let's go shopping, let's see a movie. She's pointedly imploring him to escort her to different places. So it's not his companionship she's seeking his driving skills, in fact. So I keep wondering, who is this woman? She seems in the video, the actress seems like a hip, young, urban person, but why is she not able to be mobile and access places in the city that she wants to? Does she not have private transport? Does she not have confidence to go by public transport? Can't she hail an Ola or Uber? And does she not have money to pay for these things? Because it's puzzling, because in reality, when I look around, I don't see such helpless Indian young urban women who are clinging and pleading with the men in their lives to take them to different places. The lady who cleans our house, her 21-year-old daughter, goes to the village hart herself and buys her own clothes. And a few days ago, she showed me her new mobile phone. She said, Didi, main touch phone le aayi. She had gone to the mobile shop herself, looked around at the models and bought what she wanted. So in 2015, which is the year this song released, in fact, 33% of all two-wheeler purchases were by women. And ever since TVS introduced the gearless scooty in the mid-90s, middle-class women in small towns have taken to the scooty like a fish to water. And Honda last year introduced a brand called Navi, which is a blend of scooter and motorbike. And they tested it in Gujarat first. And they found that 25% of the buyers were women, because they were seeking the thrill of a motorbike ride. So the story of, the growth of mobility of women in India is astonishing and heartening. Because women are facing various constraints in mobility, whether it's social, cultural, you can't go to this place, you can't go to that place, you have to come back by a certain time, you can't take the car because the husband is using it for something, and of course the constraints that the city imposes in terms of, lonely bus stops or no last mile connectivity between the home and the metro, no safety on the streets, harassment as a commuter. Despite all that, women have found creative and innovative ways, and sometimes with very limited resources, to work around these problems and remain mobile and access places. I think that's really heartening.
I think it would be great if you could share perhaps some of those creative examples.
Yeah. For example, let me tell you about the southern towns. When you go there, there is this practice of the known auto driver. So, women have overcome the uncertainty of going with an unknown auto driver who can sometimes misbehave or overcharge, and they're notoriously rude, by creating this entity called the known auto driver. So he is an auto driver who is trustworthy and plies in the neighborhood. So they exchange mobile phone numbers, and whenever the woman wants to go out, she calls this particular guy. So it's a win-win for everyone, because the family is not then fretting about her safety. She manages to go where she wants to, and she even tweaks her schedule to match the availability of the auto, and the guy gets some assured rides. And another example is from, and before that I must tell you that I've met women in these southern towns that I'm talking about, who would not have gone out at all had it not been for this system, because their husbands don't approve of them going wherever they want to with unknown drivers. Another example is from where I live, in Greater Noida. So the beauty parlors in Greater Noida, and it's a city with no public transport. And the streets are deserted, and you can't really hail an auto when you want to. So the beauty parlors then have devised a system of pick and drop. So for the housewife at 11 o'clock, after the husband goes and the kids are off and she wants to go to the beauty parlor and all the good ones are in the market area, she really can't reach there because there is no way to get there. So she makes a call to the beauty parlor, and within an hour a cab arrives and she's off for her pedicure. So,
really?
Yeah, it works. And
who lives here in Greater Noida? So you're aware of this beauty parlor cab service? No. Okay.
It is there.
Wow.
Who, you're asking a guy, so
no, that lady in white.
Okay. No, it exists. I've checked it out. So it's written pick and drop in all the ads, the ones which provide that. So I'm not saying for a moment that because women have figured out these alternatives, these jugaad measures, the government is absolved of its responsibility to provide public transport, or not for a minute. But what I'm trying to say, the point I'm making is that the keenness with which these things, women have come up with these solutions, shows their need for mobility and their willingness to do what it takes to get wherever they want.
Yeah, I mean, like that famous ad says, right? Why should boys have all the fun?
Absolutely, like Priyanka Chopra, that ultimately globally mobile woman says in that ad, why should boys have all the fun?
Right. If I take just my story, right? I've been living across, and last 2 years I've been living in Delhi. I drive a car, I can navigate anywhere. I usually take the metro most times, wherever, and it's been a blessing, right? I'm fairly confident. I have the money to look for multiple types of transport should I get stuck. I have a support system that I know that if I do get stuck somewhere, middle of the night somewhere, I'll give a call and people would come. I still, even for a person like me, I find navigating in Delhi sometimes really overwhelming, So I'm just trying to think for an average Joe who's, say a 16, 17-year-old girl, Shrabani here, for example, how do you have as a researcher, as somebody who sort of studied this, do you think we can make public spaces that are presently so alienating in a way You know, do you think they are alienating first?
Yeah, I think, you know, the city is not being constructed keeping women in view, and the reason for that is of course historical, because most cities were constructed in the late 19th century and early 20th century when women were not in the public space at all, they were at home. So the urban planners and architects and civil engineers who are responsible for the spatial structure of the city, there were no women among them, and therefore the entire transport infrastructure cities has been designed keeping in view the adult working male of the dominant community, the wage earning male who packs his dabba and goes from 9 to 5. So, and that's how it's always been. To give you an example from transport, look at the way buses are designed. You have, a woman passenger typically has bags of sabzi and groceries with her, and if she's a woman, if she's a mother, she'll have one kid maybe in her hand and another 3-year-old whose hand she's holding. And the bus comes screeching to a halt in front of her. There is this high step, and she has to negotiate holding 2 kids and those bags. She has to climb that bus and handle all the other male passengers who are pushing her. It's quite a feat, and this is an Indian scenario. And in the West, it's still a challenge. People are trying to represent, the fact that the woman passenger is a separate entity and has all these encumbrances when she's walking. And so they have, the ramp which comes out and low steps so that people can get in easily. But in India, we are taking our time to even acknowledge this. So the city is therefore, spaces are built without taking into account women's everyday lives.
So do you think things would be different if during the planning, if there were more women thinking about how bus steps should be or where bus stops should be, or how to draw this? If women were involved more in planning, you think things would be
absolutely
different?
But sadly that's not the case, and women continue to be really tragically underrepresented in urban planning, architecture. I'm not sure when I met a civil engineer, woman civil engineer, and I believe I read a statistic where it said that at the when in architectural schools the intake of girls is as much as 50%, but only about 5% of women are practicing architects. They all drop off. So in fact, I think that the place where mobility of women is discussed maximum is in those bad WhatsApp jokes which are full of, how badly women drive and how badly they use the road and how dumb they are as drivers and things like that. So,
given that, we have a lot of infrastructure that we inherit, right? There's a lot of infrastructure that's out there. You can't change it. Our cities are the way they are. They're growing the way they are. So let's assume nothing can be changed, right? You can't always wish that, it was better planning or whatever.
Yeah.
And if things have to be sensitized, is it even possible to change? Given the fact that on that infrastructural side, there is very little that one can actually change, say in a city like Delhi.
I guess you're right, because in city infrastructure is like a legacy system. I mean, it's been there for ages, and if you want to change something, then it results in displacement of people, and there's so much of cost involved and things like that. But there are interventions which are possible and which have been made. So one example is of Vienna, the capital of Austria. So in Vienna, the administration is like Vienna, the city itself is like a showcase for gender-sensitive urban design. Apparently, since the mid-90s, the administration has been really committed to making policies which benefit men and women equally. So, before they do a project, they study who uses the space, what are their aims, how they move around, etc. To give you an example, there was a public park in Vienna, and the administration noticed that girls who are above 9 years old slowly stopped coming to the park. And it's a great thing that they noticed it, first of all, because nobody would care, for example, in India. But so having done that, they put some researchers on the job to see why was that happening. And they found that boys who were the same age were much more aggressive, and because they played football while the girls played, something like racket sports, the boys kept encroaching into the area where the girls hung out, and gradually they got lesser and lesser space, and the girls just stopped coming to the park. So having noticed that, the administration hired landscape architects and landscape designers and architects to sort of find a solution. And then they made a separate enclosure in the park where girls could hang out. Not only girls, it's not like a restricted area, but a separate ring-fenced area where girls could play racket sports. And they also made a small adjacent area for toddlers and little children, a sand pit kind of thing, because they had noticed that the girls who are 9 and 10 are childminders of their chota brothers and sisters. So this way, they could play their whatever games and keep an eye on their younger siblings. And slowly, slowly, the girls started coming back to the park. And it's a great example of, how gender-sensitive urban design can work. But the story doesn't end there. So last winter, when I was in Madrid for a conference, and there I met the landscape designer who had worked on this park. And she said that, and this is something which you will not find in magazine articles about this initiative, she said that there was a lot of reaction, adverse reaction to what they had done. And all the boys, they teamed up together and they boycotted the park, and they said, get lost, you paint your park pink and you call all the girls, we're not going to come there. And the city had several subgroups who also reacted sharply to this initiative. So change doesn't come easy, and even in a place like Vienna, which is supposed to be a pioneer of gender-sensitive urban design, it's been a rough ride.
Yeah. Perhaps in India, it couldn't be more stark, right? Say between 2011 and 2015, India has been one of those few countries where percentage of women in workforce has actually dropped. You know, when we did this research a couple of years back, we were actually shocked. So you see more women around working these days and moving about in cities, but it's also true that as a percentage of population, we've actually dropped. Yeah. And the drop is the sharpest when it comes to, people who are going from, say, junior to middle management, roughly in their early 30s, maybe coinciding with marriage and motherhood and whatever else. So do you think women, tend to become less mobile, or is there some other reason? Or if you make things more gender sensitive, like for example, in the example that you took in the landscaping of the park, should we take some steps, or people should take some steps, or are they taking some steps?
This is a really sore point with me. So, having observed European cities, I have one word for you on this: childcare, or maybe two words. Childcare, it boils down to that. And in European cities, the government has intervened in this space and provided reliable childcare. And wherever that has happened, women are able to be both mothers and career people. And in France, which is the country I've lived in, there are different kinds of childcare facilities that the government provides. It's a collective creche, or there's one lady who's looking after a maximum of 3 children, or there's a one-to-one nanny system. But in all cases, it's the government which decides that this person is qualified to handle children. Right? And because a working mother needs that reassurance that her most precious possession is in safe hands when she's away. In India, for example, the government is in all sorts of places, airlines and hotels, and in my opinion, if there is one area where the government we need state intervention, it is this. Right now, any bored auntie can open a play school and can apply for a license and probably get it, and no one is checking why is this person qualified to handle children. And sometimes I think they don't even bother with a license, they just hang a board outside the house. And I visited some of these places, and you go in the afternoon, you'll find TV blaring and age-inappropriate TV serials being watched by chota bachas and with some random maid, and the main auntie will be sleeping. And I once left my kid with, when I was really desperate, I left my kid in Noida creche, and it was quite a popular creche in that area. And I went there in the evening and I saw there were all these kids in the garden, and there were geese, you know, big birds let loose, and they were hanging around and approaching the kids threateningly, and it was quite alarming, and nobody was supervising it, and geese can get quite aggressive. And, you know, who can be at peace with a situation like this? I mean, any mother will want to rescue her kid from an environment like this and say, you know, bhaad mein jaye meeting, but I need to go back and get my kid. So, I really think if the government intervenes in this space, the rate of women who drop off from the workforce will come down sharply. And I feel it is women's right to the city, providing this kind of urban facility to enable them to be mobile, to pursue their career, is, I think, part of the right to the city.
Absolutely. I think I'd like to take one example from right here in this hotel. So, Amit, Maddie and I have been working on putting together this knowledge factory. So we've been coming to this venue pretty much every other day for the last couple of weeks. And the salesperson here, Gurjeet, I don't know if she's around. So the wonderful thing about this hotel that I found was that she was always available, you know, whenever we came. And it made us feel so good, you know, and whatever they were doing in the hotel. And I was very curious. So she said she had this 2-year-old child. And I said, okay, so, and it was 6:30, and I was saying, okay, you know, what happens, you know, because you've got such a tough job, you're in sales, and what do you do with your child? So she says that the hotel has a creche, you know, and there are fairly, you know, most of the mid-management is women, and they continue to be here, and don't worry about, and they're allowed to go a couple of times to see the child. So you're right. I mean, then why would she not be able to perform what?
Yeah.
So, but do you honestly think that there is, you know, while we say that government has to do more and workplaces have to do more, do you think there is a lot more talk about gender now, which sort of also perhaps makes living in a city easier for women now, because there's a lot more talk about gender?
While talking about companies and facilities and all that, I would say that there is, you know, more gender sensitization workshops. I believe you went for one yourself, right?
Yesterday, on this International Women's Day, which I had, you know, when I was coming from this gender safety workshop yesterday and coming out from this airport, so this lady who frisks you said, "Madam, happy Women's Day." By then I was really cheesed, everybody wishing you happy Women's Day. And I said, isn't it every day? I mean, what is this about March 8th? So she said, हाँ, कहता every day, but at least this साल में एक बार दूसरे लोग भी तो सोचते हैं अपने बारे में. So I thought she couldn't have put it better, but yes, yeah, sorry
so
to digress.
Gender sensitive workshops are definitely happening more in companies, but you know, I've observed some practices which, especially in software companies, which are entrenched practices, and I think it's time to relook at them. For example, if there is an important client coming, it's always the young managers, the young girls who are asked to dress up and do the traditional welcome for them. And, you know, a few months ago, I was in a seminar, and the principal of Bluebell School, she's a wonderful lady, she was sharing with us how she does these gender-sensitive workshops for primary children. So she gave an example of how in schools, whenever there's a annual day or inter-house dance competition, it's the boys who handle the sound system and the lighting, while the girls do the makeup and the costume and things like that. So she noticed that, and she decided to bring about a change, and then she mixed it up, and she said whoever is good at whatever job will do it. It's a competence thing, it's not a gender thing. And it's important to recognize at an early age so that, you know, they don't grow up and then do the same thing of welcoming the girls welcoming chief guests. So yes, in companies, for example, I think there is more awareness. So you're right.
Do you think it's just a facade, or is real change happening? Your last word on it.
Definitely there is, it's palpable, this whole gender thing in, at least in metropolitan India, and after that unfortunate Nirbhaya incident, it's like a watershed. I mean, everything is viewed with a gender lens, sometimes really with a vengeance. So I understand that in really hardcore technology companies, you know, guys sort of bite their tongue before they say offhand things which can be misconstrued as being gender biased. So I would say there is more awareness, and there is more of putting on the gender lens. Even that wonderful world of bad WhatsApp jokes, the number of anti-women jokes seems to have come down. You know, the ones which portray the wife as this completely dumb, spendthrift, suspicious, crazy person. So, but on that note, can I please tell you one last joke before we end?
It better make us all laugh. Yeah. Then you can say.
No, so this one I got a couple of days ago for Women's Day. It said that originally Women's Day was on March 6th, but the women took so long to dress up that it got postponed to March 8th. So there's no better way to end this than with a nice misogynistic joke. So thank you so much for listening.
So on this misogynistic note, I want to actually ask just two maybe a man and a woman, you know, one story or one experience that you feel perhaps, you know, mobility and women. So yeah, maybe one woman here and Parul there.
Yeah, anything about women in the city, not necessarily mobility, but...
Parul here.
Sorry. Meena, I have the mic. I don't really have a story to say, but I think what I want to say is that while, you know, it would be great for government to come in and, you know, make various kinds of interventions that would make mobility easier for women, I think the most important thing is behavior change. Until that happens, all of this really doesn't matter at the end of the day. And I think that that is where both public and private need to come together. And when you can have a campaign, when there is dengue or chikungunya, there is no reason, especially after Nirbhaya, that we cannot do whatever is needed in the public space to bring about that behavior change.
Because the one thing that you would want for that behavior change to happen?
Meaning, yeah, I would want public campaigning on television,
okay.
You know, where boys, girls, men, women, all of them are
to change this mindset.
Bring about this behavior change, to look at women differently and give them the mobility that they must have.
Thank you.
Because otherwise we can grow up our children to achieve great things, but you don't want a Nirbhaya happening at 8 p.m., which is supposedly a safe time.
Which is why I also mentioned that example of the school, because it really starts early, you know.
Yeah. Thank you. Parul here, and then I hope we can have a man commenting on this topic.
Hi, I'm Parul from PR Moment. I just want to recall my days as a television journalist. And I was lucky enough to be never adopted what was called the so-called soft beats. I never had to cover women's issues. I covered hard news. And I spent a lot of time in the Telangana region covering people's war group and traveling through all those areas. So I think what really helped in terms of mobility was that we had complete support from our organization and more importantly from my parents, who never stopped me from being a hard news journalist. That was my experience growing up. I had complete freedom to do whatever I wanted. My question really is, do you think that there is so much over discussion on women's issues right now and not enough solutions?
I think discussion is a great start, because unless there is discussion, you know, there's no such thing as over discussion. The worst that can happen is that some of them are not really translating into solutions, but which is okay. It's better than a situation where you're not even talking about it, which is how it was, like, say, 10 years ago or 15 years ago. I mean, who spoke about these things? People made sexist remarks, people did whatever they want, and nobody dared say anything. So from that, it's a departure, definitely, and it's a welcome departure, and at least even if like 10% of them become action, it's a great start.
A last word, yeah.
Hi, my name is Rajneesh. So picking up on the point of solutions, I think, Meena, you have yourself done one of the most powerful research that led X Prize to launch the Women's Safety X Prize in India, which is really about mobility for women to be safe at any point of time. But Meena, I just want your opinion and perspective on how affordable do you think the device would be that anybody across the strata can afford that kind of a powerful device to ensure their own safety? Thank you.
Well, I think the premise of the Women's Safety Prize was that it has to be affordable. I mean, one of the things why there are enough number of safety devices and safety systems that exist today, they're not able to scale primarily because of this. So I don't know how much it should cost. I don't think It's a simple answer to that. But if it is not affordable, I don't think it will be adapted. So I think that's... Well, thank you so much. I think I've been privileged to have Vandana here.